Imagine you wake up and the first thing you feel is the weight. There's a silver ring on your forearm, thick as a thumb, and it pulls a little every time you move. Peat smoke hangs under the roof beams because there's no chimney, just a hole. And your eyes sting slightly for the first few minutes of every single day of your life. Someone brings you a basin of warm water, and somewhere behind you, a woman you bought in Dublin is the one carrying it. That's more or less what it felt like to be rich in the Viking Age. But here's the thing. It wasn't wealth the way you're picturing it. It was weight, performance, obligation, and a quiet, permanent terror of being the man who stopped giving. A rich Viking didn't have a vault. He had arms. Those silver arm rings weren't jewelry in the way we use the word. They were capital, worn, visible, and cuttable. Your net worth sat on your forearm where everyone could count it, and if you needed to buy a horse, you took a chisel to your own bracelet. Ibn Fadlan, an Abbasid diplomat who ran into these people on the Volga in 922, wrote that the men were covered in dark green designs from toenail to neck and were never without an axe, a sword, and a dagger. He also claimed something stranger. Every time a man's fortune hit 10,000 dirhams, he had a neck ring made for his wife. 20,000, 2 rings, and so on. Think about that for a second. Your wife's throat was your bank statement, published daily, in public. The green glass beads they prized cost roughly 1 silver coin each, and glass wasn't made in Scandinavia. Every bead was an import, which meant every bead was proof your trade network reached somewhere other people's didn't. Today we call that a status symbol. They just wore it closer to the skin. The beads, the silks, the coins, all of it arrived on the same ships that carried people. The hall at Lejre in Denmark ran nearly 50 meters long and 10 wide. 100 warriors, plus families, plus dogs, plus smoke. At the center sat the Høgsæti, the high seat. Our word high seat is a direct descendant, and the benches running down both walls weren't seating. They were a ranking, rendered in wood, republished every single night in front of everyone you knew. The honored guest sat facing the chief. Everyone else sat exactly as far from the middle as they deserved. Archaeologists at Lejre pulled about 40 pieces of bronze, silver, and gold jewelry out of the hall, and 20 more gold objects nearby, which matters because it means the ring-giving in the poems wasn't poetry, it was inventory. There's a decent case that Lejre is the real Heorot from Beowulf, the hall in the poem, which produces a small, delicious irony. Anglo-Saxon monks wrote the most beautiful advertisement Danish kings ever received, in the language of the people the Danes were robbing. Also in that floor, hundreds of animal bones. Somebody hauled those carcasses, butchered them, burned them, swept up after. That somebody didn't eat at the benches. The symbol was not a party, it was a ceremony, and as best we can reconstruct it, it ran in 3 rounds. First, horn to the gods. Second, the minni, to the ancestors and the dead. Third was the bragarfull, the boasting cup, where you stood up in front of the entire hall and formally announced something you intended to do, publicly, under oath, extremely drunk. And you couldn't nurse your drink, because a drinking horn has no base. You can't put it down until it's empty. The object enforces the rule. The politics were vicious and invisible. Who got the horn first, which side you passed it from, the order of the toasts? Get it wrong and you'd started a feud. Which is why the lady of the hall carried it. She chose the order, which meant she was conducting foreign policy 1 sip at a time, and she talked down the men who noticed they'd been served 9th. Ibn Fadlan also watched their morning routine, and he was not impressed. A servant girl brought a basin. The master washed his face and hair in it, rinsed his mouth, blew his nose into it, spat into it. Then the basin went to the next man in the household, who did all of it again. Same water. He called them the filthiest of God's creatures. Worth remembering, he'd decided he hated them before he unpacked. My favorite thing he recorded, though, is the merchant. On arriving at market, a Rus trader would lay bread and meat and milk at the feet of a wooden idol and ask it, directly, to send him a buyer with many dinars who wouldn't haggle. If sales were slow, he came back with more offerings. If they were still slow, he started praying to the smaller idols standing around the big one, which he explained were his lord's wives and children. He escalated. He was escalating to a manager in the 10th century. Here's the part that reorganizes everything. The Vikings barely had money, not in our sense. While Rome and the Carolingians ran on coins, the Norse ran on weight. An object was worth exactly what it weighed in silver, and nothing else. Not what was stamped on it, not who minted it, which is why they cut everything up. Bracelet too valuable for what you're buying? Chop a piece off. Church plate, cups, ingots, brooches, all of it got hacked down into hack silver and dropped on a folding scale. And because everyone knew a bar could be base metal with silver plating, traders nicked and bent the pieces to check. That test made more fragments. The distrust literally manufactured the currency. The numbers are absurd. Spillings hoard, Gotland, 67 kilos of silver. The Penrith hoard, 190 objects, 27 complete arm rings, and 117 cut and broken pieces. 117 broken, 27 whole. That ratio is the whole culture in one line. Silver here wasn't kept, it was processed. The Silverdale hoard threw in a bonus. Coins naming a Viking ruler of northern England nobody had ever heard of. An entire king, erased, found in a field. And in April 2026, 2 Norwegian detectorists sweeping a farm in Osterdalen hit a scatter of signals that turned into a stream. Nearly 3,000 coins and hack silver fragments. Enough, by later land records, to buy a whole farm. The professor who assessed it said someone had used that ground as a safe. The savings account took 1,000 years to mature. But where did all that Arabic silver come from? Because that's what most of it is. Abbasid dirhams in Swedish fields. The enormous concentration of Islamic silver in Scandinavian hoards, especially on Gotland, is widely read as the archaeological receipt for one particular trade. The word was thrall for a man, ambat for a woman. It survives in modern English as enthralled. We still use it. We use it about films we liked. A thrall could own nothing, inherit nothing, and leave nothing behind. Under Norse law, he was property, bought, sold, traded, and at his master's death, sometimes killed alongside him. Ibn Fadlan watched exactly that happen at a chieftain's funeral on the Volga. Excavations in Dublin have turned up long chains, sized to pass around human necks and hold people in a line. Dublin's harbor made it an ideal import and export market for human beings moving across Europe. The trade ran from at least 786 to 1009, and estimates of its scale have been revised sharply upward in recent years as researchers work through the European records. And the part that closes the circuit. Norse farming, especially the immense wool production needed for sails and clothing, leaned heavily on that labor. The sails that made the raids possible were woven by people taken in the last raid. There is no clean version of this. Manumission existed. A thrall could occasionally buy his freedom, or be freed outright, and the boundary wasn't ethnic either. Theft or murder could sentence a free Norse woman to slavery in the household of the person she'd wronged. The line wasn't blood, it was contract, and it could fall on you. Now the other cost, the one that fell on the rich man himself. He could not keep any of it. A chief who gave silver away attracted followers. The corollary is the trap. A chief who stopped giving lost them. Wealth wasn't a possession. It was a payment plan you were never allowed to finish. Hoarding was the single most contemptible thing a powerful man could do, which is why the highest title in the language was Baugbriotar. ring breaker. Not the man who has the rings, the man who breaks them. So if you can't keep silver, and you can't keep land, and your sons can be killed, what exactly are you accumulating? The Norse had a word, orthstir, roughly, word glory, the reputation that keeps circulating in other people's mouths after you're gone. In a culture with no banks, no deeds, no written records of who owned what, the only asset that couldn't be stolen was what people said about you. Gold could be taken, the farm could burn. But if enough people told the story of the rings you broke, the story outlived you, and it was the only thing that did. The Havamal says it flatly, in the most quoted stanza in Old Norse. Cattle die, kinsmen die, you will die the same way. One thing never dies, the reputation of the dead. 1,000 years later, we call that legacy, or, if we're being honest about it, personal brand. So the rich Viking wasn't buying objects. He was buying people who would talk about him. The silver on his arm was just the payment method, which is why he cut it apart. You wake up, you feel the weight on your forearm, and the whole point of that weight, the entire reason it's beautiful, the reason it's heavy, the reason a woman you bought is carrying your water so you can wear it, is that one day soon you're going to take a blade to it and hand the pieces to someone else. Same as us, really. We're all just breaking rings. Ours are simply harder to weigh.